Hello.
They said sit as close to you as possible, so it's my pleasure.
Oh, that's nice. Oh, great.
Yeah, it was nice for me.
Now, you're here to do British rock gospel, which sounds very enigmatic to me.
Well, I mean, I don't know what people think of gospel music. In England, at least, we've kind of educated the people to realize that when I go and do a gospel concert, I mean, I can only sing rock and roll. I mean, I don't know how to go into opera. So it tends to be the same kind of music that I do. For instance, when I came here and did concerts in February, the music is going to be like that music. The lyrical content, of course, will be quite different. But I've brought along also some friends of mine who are really good exponents of harmonies, rock and roll harmonies, Nutshell. And actually, it's a bit confusing. Nutshell are going to be called RPM. They've just signed a contract with the record label, and their first record's going to have a change of name, but for this purpose, it's going to be Nutshell. And Garth Hewitt, who's a singer-songwriter, and Now, let's talk positive. When you come to the concerts,
of course, yes,
you're going to hear his lyrics. They're really good. So what we're going to do is present our feelings and our beliefs about God and about Jesus via our music.
This is actually quite a new thing for South Africa. I mean, I know perhaps I shouldn't say this on television, but our presentation of religion, I feel, is rather still at the sort of long frocks and candelabra stage. And I'm just wondering, do you think teenagers can actually identify with religion these days the way it's being put across?
Well, maybe they can't identify with candelabras and long frocks, but there's nothing wrong with either of those things, you know. They have a part to play because there are people who can relate to them.
Yes.
But if we want to reach a younger group of people, I mean tomorrow's people in other words, then somehow or another we have to communicate. And what it seems to me that the church maybe hasn't done for a long time is communicate. And communicating means that you have to get a relationship going. And there has to be a common denominator, not the lowest common denominator, but just a common denominator. And rock and roll music, or just music, is such a fantastic thing because it draws a lot of different people from different walks of life together in their taste. And so therefore it's a perfect way to say, come and enjoy music and listen to one man's philosophy.
Yes.
Or in the case of this tour, 5 people's philosophy. And it happens to be Christian. But for instance, if you went to see George Harrison in concert, you're likely to get a Buddhist philosophy thrown at you.
Yeah, but when George Harrison declared that he was going to be a Buddhist and sort of sit in caves and go Om all the time, that became trendy. I mean, that was a trendy thing to be.
Yeah.
But to be a Christian is not trendy.
It never has been, no. I suppose we're still a minority group, so therefore if you join the ranks, you are in fact a nonconformist. I mean, a lot of people think, I've had people say, oh, you know, you're just conforming to what everyone wants, and I think, but not everyone does want it.
Were you ever accused of trying to cash in on being a Christian, sort of saying you're using this as a gimmick to help your career?
Yeah, I did, but it was a very funny thing. They said to me, first of all, you might lose all your fans, right? And I thought, well, if I do, so what? I either believe or I don't believe at all. So I went ahead and told everyone that I did believe. Then when I didn't lose my fans, they said, oh, well, of course he's cashing in. Because mostly critics want it both ways.
Oh, yes.
They want to say that it's a gimmick. And they also want to say, well, look, if you do this, it's crazy because you're going to lose all your fans.
How do you feel about punk?
Well, punk has changed, really. I mean, the new wave is a better term for that general form of music. And people like Police and Squeeze and even the Boomtown Rats, you know, come up with some cracking records. I mean, really marvelous stuff. But the actual punk, when you think of punk, you think of some of the guys with the...
You think of Safety Pins.
That's right. Well, I don't know that the Safety Pins are still happening anymore, but some of the lyrics are a bit awful. I mean, and they sing about anarchy and people doing whatever they want to do, which is impossible. I mean, how can you? It means that if I want something of yours and I'm stronger than you, I can just take it. Well, that can't be right, can it? I mean, it's just impossible for that to be right.
Well, you really can use music 2 ways, can't you? I mean, you can use it in a positive or a negative way.
Listen, there are 2 forces in this world, and that's God, and there's the devil. And if we'll allow him to, he'll take whatever we have to give him. He didn't create rock and roll. He created nothing at all, but he'll take whatever we give him. And I've spent quite a few years now saying, let's take some of it back. It belongs to God. He created everything, so rock and roll must come under that mushroom, that umbrella thing of God's creation. And so why should we let him, why should the devil have rock and roll? He'll take it if we give it to him.
Do you feel that generally kind of pop music is used in the wrong way? I mean, because some of the lyrics stink, don't they? I mean, they're
yes, I think, I mean, it's too much to generalize because there are a lot of rock and roll artists who, not Christian, but have definitely feelings, that's right, and responsibility. But there are a lot of people who don't have the responsibility. They seem to be adults still messing around at being children.
Yes. Going back to the early days, because, I mean, your image has actually changed tremendously. I can remember this sort of the early movies, and the early image was kind of the surly lip and the coif and all. I'm not going to ask you why you're 40 and still look 20. I refuse.
I'd rather ask you why I'm 40 and feel 90.
Well, you just got off the plane, that's
I
why.
know, I know, it's dreadful.
But I mean, those sort of early days when you had this kind of Elvis Presley image, was that manufactured by somebody else or was that you?
Well, the press manufactured that for me because although Elvis was my main influence, you see, if there hadn't been an Elvis, there couldn't possibly have been a me, because the singers that were around when I was very young at school were Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, Bing Crosby, Teresa Brewer,
Yeah.
Rosemary Clooney. Now, they're all great singers. Bing Crosby died probably singing better than he ever sang before. But I didn't, here we come back to relating. I didn't relate to it. I didn't want to look like Frank Sinatra. I didn't want to sound like Bing Crosby. But when I saw and heard Elvis, I thought, for whatever, I wanted to look and sound like him. And if I had pictures taken, you know, when I first started my group,
Yes.
if I had my picture taken and my lip was going,
That's right, I remember all that.
I used to be ecstatic for
Yes.
weeks. I used to say to people at school, look at that, you know, don't think I look like
Yeah,
Elvis. I mean, it was really important for me that. But then it was also important that I met people like Jack Good, who produced my first TV
Yes.
series, and
Now,
he
did
said
he
to
was
me,
kind of instrumental in changing the way you were?
oh yeah, he said, get rid of the guitar and get rid of the sideburns. He said, you don't actually look like Elvis, but Elvis is the prototype, you know?
Yes.
So if you sort of stand in a certain way and go, you can give an Elvis image. And he tried to get that away, and I think it was a good thing that I listened to him.
Now, we get a lot of young people who send in songs to us, lyrics, and actually some very good stuff. But the pop music world today is a very difficult field to get into, isn't
yeah.
it? I mean, how do you start? I mean, it's probably a very difficult question, but I mean, the
Well,
kid
it is.
wants to get on, and they're good. What do they do?
You have to be able to afford to make a fairly good demo, which works out fairly expensive, although nowadays the recording business is in a low, and so therefore it's perhaps a little bit easier to get into a studio. But you make a good little demo, send it to a publisher.
But you have to
then
pay
wait.
for that yourself.
Oh, most of the times, yeah, of
Yes.
course. Unless you have written a great song and a publisher says, I'll give you the money to go and make a demo. Then
I
you're
see.
very lucky.
And the tour this time, I mean, how does it differ from the tour that you did before? It's a very similar kind of music,
Well,
is it?
The music is exactly the same. The towns we'll be playing in are the same.
Yeah.
Durban, Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, East London, and Joburg. The lyrical content will be different, and I'll be, rather than trying to purely entertain, I'll, as I say, try to share a philosophy that means a great deal to me.
Yes.
But it will never get in the way of the musical content, because it's 2 hours of music.
Well, I'm coming for one,
Oh,
and I'm sure
good.
everybody else will.
Okay.
And I hope more than even the 46,000 people that saw you last time. See
Was
you
it
this
that
time.
many?
Yes,
I didn't know there were
was.
that many people in South Africa.
Cliff, thanks very much. Terrific.